lot about self. We talk about finding ourself, being our best self, going beyond ourself. But what is that self? The American Psychological Association says that personality is the characteristic patterns of thinking, behaving, and feeling. And those personalities are made up of the genes we inherit and also the influences from the environment in which we grow up. Things like friends, family, your religion, socioeconomic status, economics, and so on. We also associate personality with things like physical appearance. We say things like fiery redheads or brunettes are the center of the party. Blondes are so silly. Think of all the combinations of these different influences on personalities. That leaves us with personalities and selves that are infinite, like there are stars. If you look on the internet for the word personality, you might find images like these that show to varying degrees how complex we think personalities are. Or perhaps an image like this. Oops, no, not that one, or that one. That was a lot of clicking. Or images like this, or the one on the left, the Myers-Briggs test. Myers-Briggs says that there are 16 different personalities. I was recently sent another personality test, I don't remember the name of it, by Scott Sandoval. He's an English teacher here at Tampa Prep. It was a link to an online survey. I clicked on it. It took me to a web page. It was what seemed like 100 questions long, and each question had varying degrees of responses. When I concluded the test, it told me that I was 92% a number 7. There are 9 personalities in this test, but you can be varying degrees of different personalities. If I wanted to, I could pay an additional fee, and it would give me a complex report on how to be my best number 7, and also how to deal with the inadequacies of my number. You see, we're obsessed with personality, hence all the tests. And we think we're relatively fixed in these personalities, hence all the names that we place on them. But I'm here to say that perhaps through learning another language, and more importantly, learning another culture to a deep, deep level, that you can find some other selves. In 2003, a research team showed this picture of a bridge to a group of Spanish speakers and a group of Germans. They asked them to describe the bridge. The Spanish speaker used words like things like big, strong, long, dangerous. Same bridge, same picture. German speakers said things like beautiful, elegant, curved, peaceful. How such shocking differences for the same bridge, the same picture? Well, you see, in Spanish, the word for bridge is masculine. And in German, the word for bridge is feminine. We take things from our language and we use them as filters to see the world. These speakers use the things that they associate with human gender and associate them with the bridge. But you don't have to have gender in your language to be influenced by language. Let's talk about capitalization. In English, we capitalize the word I, no matter where it falls in the sentence. But there's lots of languages where this is not the case. Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, Italian, and many, many more. What difference does this make? As an English speaker, do I pay more attention to the individual because the word is capitalized? As a speaker of those other languages, am I given more of a chance to pay attention to the rest of the sentence because it is lowercase? We don't know. Language, I could go on with examples. Language has influences on things like concepts that don't exist in some languages. In Portuguese, they have the word saudade, which we don't have in English. They have an emotion. They have a word for it, but we don't have it in English. It's a feeling of sort of missing and longing for something, a type of sadness, but we have no word. In other languages that have words for colors that we don't have words for. Does that mean we don't see those colors? We don't recognize them? In Walpidi language from Australia, you can put the words in the sentence in any order. Any order. The sky's the limit. You have full reign over what your sentence looks like. You might match it to something someone said to you before to make the conversation flow differently, or you might put the word at the beginning or the end to place more emphasis on it. Language exerts pressures on us. But this is just language. What about culture? Culture molds us. When we think of culture, we think of things like folk dances or food, festivals, maybe music as well. But culture can be much more complex. It can be things like our relationships, marriage, our understanding of romance, our perception of dating. It can be things like how we perceive life and death, the value we place on work, the space that food holds in our society. As many of you are aware of, the Mexicans celebrate Day of the Dead on November 1st and November 2nd, and I teach about this every year in my Spanish class. We, of course, cover things like how houses are decorated, what foods are eaten, what the street's like, what the festival, what the event is like when you're in Mexico for Day of the Dead. But what it all boils down to is their different perception of death. How can something so universal as death, we all do it, how can it be interpreted so differently? Close your eyes for a second. I'm going to say a word, and you think of an image. Death. Okay, you can open your eyes. Maybe you thought of something like this. Maybe not this exact image, but perhaps something ominous and scary like the Grim Reaper. This is who we typically associate with death in the United States. Now, compare this in stark contrast to La Catrina, the Mexican representation of death, La Muerte. As you can see, she's a socialite dripping from head to toe with ribbons and bows, flowers and colors. Yes, she is made of bones, but she is not designed to incite fear. She is designed to evoke delight. Because you see, in Mexico, death is not the end. Death is but a continuation of life. Death may be even the beginning. They say that while we're here on earth, perhaps we are just dreaming, and then when we die, we truly wake up. Now, take these two stark contrasts and think about the fact that you've been aware of death for quite some time, perhaps younger, but at least by the time you're an adolescent, until the day you actually do it. And how can that perception change the way you live your life? Another example of how culture molds us is the place that food holds in society. I lived in France for 2 years. One of those years, I worked in a public school. And since I worked in the public school, I got to eat lunch there every day. Quite an experience. We were given 1 hour for lunch. There was wine served for the teachers. We were served a 4-course meal. There was an appetizer, a main dish, cheese course, and then dessert. And then after that meal every day, all the teachers retired to the teacher's lounge where we had coffee before we went back to class. But what I realized is it wasn't only about the fact that we were having all that lovely food and that coffee. It was about the time we spent together. José Colón, who was the director of Parisian food services in the late 90s and early 2000s, said, lunch is important, food is important, because you share. You share with your friends. You share with your family. You share with your colleagues. You share food, but you share time. You share conversation. You see, while we think of the French, we think of their food rituals and their gourmet cuisine, but what I learned while I lived there, that it wasn't about the food only. It was about the stopping. It was about the taking time for others. Culture starts to press us. Culture molds us. It bends us over time. So, does that mean that I'm really different when I speak in French or Spanish or Portuguese or English? Perhaps I haven't made my point. Don't take it from me, though. In 2006, Dr. Nairan Ramirez Esparza and a team of researchers from the University of Connecticut did a study. They asked speakers, bilingual Mexican Americans, to take a personality test, the Big 5 personality test. See, there's another one. And they took it 2 times. They took it once in Spanish and once in English. And the results were shockingly different. I'm guessing you guessed that by now. When they tested in English, they showed higher scores for extrovertedness and for conscientiousness. But they didn't stop here. They did a follow-up. They asked the speakers to write 2 times, once to write in Spanish about their personalities and once to write in English about their personalities. 15-minute writing exercise. Guess what? They wrote different things when they wrote. In Spanish, they wrote about themselves in relationship to others, in relationships to friends and families and to their hobbies. When they wrote in English, they wrote about things like their daily activities, their colleges, their achievements. We've been pressed. We're pressed by culture. So now back to me. In French, I feel a little more elegant, more poised, maybe perhaps a little more intelligent. In Spanish, I feel powerful and strong and maybe more fun. In Portuguese, I learned perhaps a little bit more about humility and tenderness. I also realized that I could be confrontational when I needed to, not something that's natural to me. And in English, I'm more dutiful and more pragmatic. So, they tell us language is so useful. It's useful on your resume. It's useful on vacation. It makes your brain more flexible. You'll be a better problem solver. Maybe it even prevents Alzheimer's. But what if I say it may be the key to a more complex you, a more complete you, a you with more lenses to see the complex world that you live in and connect with those people that live in it? So I say, do your personality and yourself a favor. Unleash it with a little bit of language class. Let it be nudged and pressured by another language, another culture. And who knows where that will take you. Maybe you'll discover your higher purpose than self. But of which self? Thank you.